Welcome to this episode of Sweet Speak. I'm your host, JD Miller. We continue on our journey in AI with C-suite executives in today's podcast. I recently had the privilege of sitting with Matt Fornito, founder and CEO of the AI Advisory Group, to talk about AI for executives in 2025 and beyond. If you aren't familiar with Matt, along with leading the AI Advisory Group, Matt has served as a CDO, head of AI, and data scientist at a number of organizations, and spent 2 decades as a catalyst for transformative change. As a consultant, over a decade he's spent building AI practices from scratch, even winning NVIDIA's Partner of the Year award and helping Fortune 500 companies accelerate their AI journey. He joined me on LinkedIn Live, and after the break, we have that Sweet Speak conversation. You're the CEO of the AI Advisory Group. Talk to me. Why did you build this group?
Oh, that is a great question, because there's 2 real components to having built this company. The first, having been in the space for a long time, from a data scientist to data engineer, moving up to head of AI to chief data officers, I saw these pain points over and over again, right? And if we look 1-2 decades ago, when everyone was building machine learning models or getting excited about the space or trying to figure out what to do, we were seeing 60 to 90% of models never make it to production, right? Things that were verified with an ROI, where we did those pre-assessments of hundreds of millions of dollars. And the question was, why? Why isn't this being successful? And back then, a decade ago, it was a lot to do with technology, right? When we had handoffs of data from data scientists to data engineers and trying to figure out how to scale that, and does the infrastructure support that? But that technology got so much better, especially over the past 8 years, right? When you look at what NVIDIA has done with the GPU, when you look at the SaaS software stack. But what we're seeing today still is 60 to 90% of projects are tending to fail. And so what's the real issue there? And it's people and process, right? It's not about the gaps in technology. It's not about messy data. Everyone has messy data. Everyone has legacy architecture. But if people don't trust the data, especially the leadership team, if they don't know or understand where AI can provide value and drive ROI, then are they going to leverage it? Are they going to invest in it? Where are they going to make those decisions? And how are they going to use it for decision making? So that was the real underlying piece of what I saw as a gap in the market, is that we need change management, we need transformation, and we need to build trust with the executive leadership team, drive vision, drive strategy for that. The other piece of that is a sad but interesting story, in that I, for 2 decades, worked 80 to 120 hours a week, right? That's how I was able to become a top NVIDIA partner, win Partner of the Year award, be able to be successful in this space. But in 2021, right before, actually December of 2020, right before Christmas, I was on a hike up in the Colorado mountains, 3 feet deep snow, ice, really, really dangerous, and made it home safe. But we had this condo downtown, and we had this 16-foot Christmas tree. And so I'd moved all this furniture around to put the Christmas tree up and have the bright lights in there. And when I went to take my boots off when I got home, the chair I sat in was tucked under the granite island countertop in the kitchen. And so when I sat down, I slammed the back of my head against that countertop, and it was lights out. It was lights out for 10 months.
Oh
This
my goodness.
wasn't a short-term concussion. And the fatigue that went with that, the migraines that went with that, like the pain associated, the inability to form new memories, to remember what my fiance told me to do, that was painful. And looking at Pareto's principle, what was I going to do with work, which was my lifeblood, my passion? And I looked at it as, what if we do this as focusing on what's meaningful and automating out the mundane? So I started only focusing on the things that actually mattered. And no one at the company knew that I had a concussion for 10 months, because the outcomes were still being highly driven, right? If I ignored everything else, focused on what mattered, then that could drive change, that could drive innovation, that could drive revenue. And same token, I could use AI and automation to automate out all the mundane things to save a ton of time. And so that's what I do with the company. Internally, we've automated 80% of the company from end to end. So anything you can think of, whether it's sales and research briefs directly in the calendar to an AI virtual assistant to statement of work creation, anything that's really manual that doesn't need to be, we've automated that. And that way I can drive this more as a true lifestyle business where we can work with the best companies in the world that are really ready to change. And the team of former Fortune 100 and 500 CDOs from Meta, Intel, GlaxoSmithKline, Novartis, Equifax, et cetera, those guys can really work at companies or with companies that are excited about this space, that want to have innovation, that want to change, but don't really know how or don't know how to accelerate that. And because everyone can wants to only work like 20 hours a week, outside of me who works more but can't work 80 plus hours a week, it's really, really valuable because I get to live and work with people who value work life balance, who value family time, who value their health. And that's so important to me after this concussion.
Talk to me a little bit because when we talk with AI and executives, there's honestly paralysis by analysis when it comes to AI solutions and tools. There's so many tools and processes out there. So, where do you start as an executive? Because you don't even know the questions to ask.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because we've looked at AI as this silo or this magic red button, and we say, just feed all your data in and press the button, and you'll get something out of it, right?
Right?
But the reality is, even AI itself is a tool, right? The models have been around for decades. You look at machine learning and deep learning since at least the 1950s, and wondering why it hasn't perpetuated further today. There weren't enough folks who could actually do it until the past like 1 to 2 decades. The technology wasn't there. So we've extremely mitigated the gap to being able to do this. But the reality is, the question that should be asked is what is hurting our business today? What is not allowing us to be more successful, right? And whether that is looking at what's going to provide the greatest cost savings, what's going to provide the greatest revenue. If we have extremely high customer churn, if it takes 4 months to get a new patch into production of our SaaS software, right? Those are things that are very painful to the company, to the customer. Those are the things that should be focused on. And if you identify what those pains are holistically as an organization and actually try to estimate what the ROI is associated with that, then you can identify what's really going to move the needle. And so that's essentially where organizations, whether they're just starting on their journey or they are hyper accelerated in this space, that's what's going to really change things because we've sat so long in this R&D silo of Harry Potter in a broom closet and we'll let you out when we let you out, but you're not talking to customers. That's the wrong perspective. It's how can data science and AI technologies support the customer, support products, support sales, support marketing, support all the things that actually drive greater interaction with the customer and internal scale.
The term digital transformation has been out there forever, right? And now I feel like that's shifted to AI transformation with that CAIO role taking off, but still organizations need to embrace it. Why isn't the role everywhere yet?
um, it's funny because I often tell partners that we're a change management firm disguised as an AI firm. The the reason why is kind of twofold, and it's the same reason why you look at the CDO role today. The CDO role today averages about an 18-month tenure. Part of it has to do with organizations don't know what the heck a CDO does or can do, and they also don't necessarily know what they need and want. If you look at the CDO role, and then we'll jump into the CAI role, is that the CDO role is kind of that CIO CTO split like 2 to 3 decades ago, right? Where
Mhm.
who's actually just managing things. And if you look at traditional CDOs who are in place today, it's security, governance, compliance, MDM, all the things that are lockdown of data. It's risk averse. It's a risk averse personality trait. And then you look at maybe the new CDAO or CAIO, where it's risk prone. It's how do we create value from data? How do we accelerate time to value? And if someone's risk prone, they're not likely to be risk averse and vice versa. So it's hard to be excellent in the entire ecosystem of space because you have to do both things. And so there's expectations from a CDO to be able to manage and control data and reduce shadow IT and all of those things, but also produce and create value. So when we look at the CAIO role, organizations are so immature in the space. As much as we talk about this, as much as we're excited about AI, organizations are still struggling where to start. And there's tons of low hanging fruit that can be pursued. And a lot of times, those are just machine learning, which you can think of as structured data, right? If we have really high customer churn, we need to figure out why, build a model for that, and then identify what are the features or behaviors that are driving them to change, and then change the internal functions of your organization. And so, starting small and creating value and trust in AI, that will allow a CAI role to emerge and to be successful because they can drive vision and strategy and be that evangelist and connector with the data and technology side by understanding that with the C suite, with the entire organization who's looking to drive value, but doesn't really understand how they can do that with AI today.
So where should it sit? Should the CAIO sit under the CEO? Should it be under the CIO, CTO, CDO, CFO? Where should it sit in an org structure then?
It's a great question. The CDO role, a lot have failed because they sit under a CIO or CTO because it's just a focus on data. And when it's just focused on data, not value, you you can do okay in that role, but you're not going to be able to accelerate that because you have barriers, essentially a blocker to the CEO because the CIO, CTO type role or CFO is life's on the line, right? The CAIO, because they are value creators, they're change agents and they have to have power to help drive change, which means they have to roll up to the CEO. They have to have buy in from the team. And without that, without them having some semblance of authoritative or directive or supported power to say, hey, let's do an assessment in each functional role, the CMO, the CPO, the COO, the CFO, let's identify where our gaps and weaknesses are today, which is vulnerable. And not many executives are ready to be vulnerable and say, I could run my practice better. And then work with the CDO to figure out how can we use data and AI to augment your function. And so the organizations that can trust a CAIO to not take their job or to not shit on them, those are going to be really, really successful. But to your point or to your question, if it doesn't roll up to the CEO, then there's not that buy-in and they're not going to be successful.
Part of that buying, you've talked before about transforming the approach to AI to be more of an AI revenue generation engine. You say revenue generation, a CEO, a CFO's, you got the buy-in. Talk about that mindset for organizations, not just efficiency, but that revenue generation.
So there's two great paths that I think organizations can take getting into this space or scaling in this space. The first is ROI. The second is ROE. When we talk about ROI, that return on investment, the fastest path for that, generally speaking, and unless you're a hyper mature organization like Google, Meta, Amazon, et cetera, are going to be structured data machine learning use cases. And so solving problems that you have structured data on, that's going to be the fastest path to change. There are amazing tools out there that allow people to build models really fast as long as you can get the data together and clean that data so it truly represents your customer, your org function, et cetera. And it's really as simple as that. We overcomplicate it, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be machine learning. It can be rules based, can create value, if then statements, right? And so that's one piece. If we're looking at cost savings, if we're looking at revenue growth, if we're looking at dollars and cents, we want ROI. We should stay in the machine learning structured data space. Now, the other side of that, talking to the hyper mature companies, which might be doing like deep learning, computer vision, and they are looking more towards like a return on future, where they know
Mhm.
they can build self driving cars, they can capitalize and cannibalize market share. But the ROE is return on employee. And the way that we look at the ChatGPT, the Claudes, the Geminis, those of the world, the large language models, a lot of people are looking at it as a pure ROI sense, right? What is the number value associated with us using this? But the reality is time is our most important asset. And so if we're coming in and saying, let's look at what actually eats up your time, whether you're an executive, whether it's the sales team, whether it's your coders, whatever the heck the group is, what eats up your time consistently over and over again and is a pain. And then we look at how can we use language models to accelerate that. So there are great programs in the coding side of the house that you can naturally language say, I want to build this application that can do this feature, and it can build that. It can build a website in seconds. And so the time to value for some like products is really going to drive change and innovation. But more importantly, and I look at it internally at my company, but also externally with those we work with, when organizations want to focus on return on employee, you say, what if we gave everyone here 10 hours back per week? What would that look like? Because if we start with that as phase one, we say, okay, that's automatically, if you want to calculate it, a 25% return on investment, right? In regards to performance output. But if we look at the actual phase two and say, we used AI and automation to handle all the mundane things, and now you have 10 hours back per week. What's actually going to move the needle? What do you need to focus on? Because that's actually going to create exponential growth. If you have more time to spend with your customers, more time to spend with your team, more time to do quality testing, those things are all going to change how your organization operates. And so the reality is organizations need to see, do I want to provide an enhanced and improved workforce, and or do I want revenue? Because you shouldn't look at both of those the same. You should look at what's most important to the success of your organization today.
You outline often the really four key challenges, and there's a lot of challenges out there when it comes to AI. Fear of unknown. We've tackled that a little bit, but there's also resistance to change, complexity, confusion, skills gap. Let's start with resistance to change. How do we overcome that challenge as an executive when it comes to AI?
um, it's always a funny question, right? Because people in general are reticent or hate change. And part of my org site grad degree was on change management. The focus on change is that, especially when you look at a lot of consulting firms, is they say, okay, here's a PDF, here's a PowerPoint, and all you have to do is these 50 things. And none of those are going to get done, right? Or one or two of those will get done. And the leaders aren't going to see the success. What really has to happen is that it's not telling everyone you have to use Chat GPT or Perplexity AI, right? That's not going to drive success. The reality is you have to say, what is going to make your day better? What is going to make your job more impactful? It has to be the personalized aspect of how does this affect me and how does it improve me? Because if it gets over that hump, if you can now, if you don't have to waste your time writing 150 emails a day because you can get a draft of those written in your inbox and then you can like quickly revise them, then you might have gone from 3 hours down to 30 minutes and you didn't have to think about what do I need to say and how do I file this away and all of those things that take our energy and willpower. So the true aspect of change management for me is how do you generate excitement and wins on a personal level? Because if you can do that and then build that trust around how AI is going to help people, whether that's a digital twin, sales agents, etc., then they can see the potential impact of that and they see the personal benefits to them. They'll start leveraging the tools and technology more. They'll start trusting it more. And then you start seeing this rolling stone gathering no moss down a mountain.
Then let's dive into complexity and confusion because there's plenty of both.
And so, we talked before this, and there's a lot of people that are bullshit artists, and the flip side of that is there's a lot of people that are building a plane in the air.
Hmm.
And everyone wants to get ahead in this space, but it's not a race, right? If you're a top 5 tech company, it's a race. But for everyone else, it's a race against yourself. It's a race against doing things right versus doing things fast. And if you do things right from foundationally from the start, then you're going to rapidly be able to accelerate that. But to do things right goes with that complexity and confusion of where do we start? Where do we invest? Like, what do we need? What does our team composition look like? Our tool stack? What's really going to move the needle in regards to use cases? And if you can't answer those questions, then you need to hire someone internally or externally that can help you understand that. Because having been in the space for 2 decades, reading on AI every single day for 2 decades, I still have no semblance of knowing everything in the space. So how can somebody who's a CMO, a CEO, a CIO, how are they going to be able to become an expert in the space? The reality is they're not. And so if that's the true case, you need to have a guide that can help drive change and innovation so you can build trust in data, you can build trust in AI, you can figure out where to actually invest so you don't just go spend $20 million on hardware and nobody uses it. Figure out like what's actually going to move the needle, what's going to increase that revenue, because maybe it's 15 million on hardware and 3 million on software and 2 million on services, and all of a sudden you've created 500 million in annual recurring revenue. So you've grossly overpaid for any cost that you've spent and any cost you'll spend the next 10 years. And that's what's really going to, I think, substantiate the willingness to change once you understand the space well enough.
You can't talk about that without talking about the skills gaps that do appear out there. We talked previously, you're not learning this stuff in school yet, right? And it's changing every day. How do you address that skills gap as a leader?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I think it really depends on who we're talking about in the organization. You look at the technologists today, the data scientists, the data and machine learning engineers, the architecture and infrastructure folks, and they need to be able to understand AI well enough to build it. And so that skills gap is usually on foundationally understanding how AI workflows work, and then what are the best practices in regards to an AI ecosystem. But when you look at, like, let's say the executive team, the skills gap it goes hand in hand with that. It's that you're never going to be an expert, and so having a sounding board or having someone help understand your organization holistically, and then being able to be that connector to technology and AI with business, that's truly the biggest gap today. It's that AI has been in a silo for so long that data scientists build whatever the heck they think they should build without any identification of how are people going to use this, and are they going to use this, and what's the ROI associated with it. And if so, if they're only focusing on building something they think people need, it's the field of dreams model. And generally speaking, the field of dreams model doesn't work that well compared to saying, let's talk with the business folks first. Let's get the business folks aligned on what they want to do. They don't have to become an expert on AI. They just have to understand what is a pain for our organization. And then let's see if we have the data and the hardware stack to be able to build and solve that question.
You talk about 4 phases of AI innovation: foundation, activation, implementation, acceleration. Where do people falter the most?
Oh
All.
man.
I know it's all of it, but if you had to pick one.
um, y- I think honestly, it's the foundation. It's that that plain analogy you gave is the reality. Is that people aren't setting up the foundation for success because they're just trying to build things on the fly, and it's why the majority of these models don't make it to production. So if foundationally you build trust and credibility in data and AI. You have the right team composition. You have the right use cases identified. You can identify, like, you can figure out how you're going to evangelize that out and how people are going to leverage it and get the buy-in, get the training. All of those things mean that now you might have a sales rep say, "Hey, can you guys do this to the data team?" And the data team can go, "Yeah, let's figure out if there's an ROI associated with it." And now you have like hypothesis driven research or insights driven by the people that interact with the customers or that are working other organizational functions. And the data and AI team can support that, or those teams can buy their own AI tools that help fix those problems. And so, if we start foundationally at doing that, of building the trust and credibility, understanding around AI, all the other ones become so much easier.
So, in your experience, what are those common pitfalls organizations face when moving from AI pilot? So, they did that, fantastic. You did the AI pilot to that full scale AI operations. And how can those pitfalls be avoided?
I think when I had my data science consulting firm starting like 2015, and we were one of 7 consulting partners for NVIDIA worldwide. I was offering everything to everyone, right? Because the data science model process was the same, no matter the industry, no matter the vertical, no matter the function. And it was a hard sell, right? Because I was asking people like, sure, just let us know what you want to do, and we can do it. And that's what I think a lot of organizations are sitting at today is what they don't know what question to ask. They don't know what to do. It's that Johari window of the unknown unknowns. And you need people that understand the business and the company well enough that they can say, this is really, really important. This is something that we need to focus on. And data and AI are, at the end of the day, they're just tools and technology to help us have better insights for behavioral change, right? That's all we should be using it for. If we're not, then it's all worthless. We can collect terabytes, petabytes, exabytes of data. If we don't use it for any decision making, at the end of the day, it fails. And so, if we can really shift that mindset to let's leverage our data, but let's improve how this is going to impact what we do and shape how we do our roles on an individual basis, that's like the true driver for me.
And organizations are sitting on such a wealth of data. Every organization considers themselves a data company. Kentucky Fried Chicken says they're a data company that happens to sell chicken, right? So everybody's sitting on this the wealth of data, and like you were just saying, if you can implement that and use that, then that's where the efficiency comes into play. I'm curious because you're seeing all these new tools every single day. We mentioned before we got on a new AI tools coming out about every 3 seconds. What emerging tools for AI interest you the most today?
I I think there's two ways of thinking about tooling. There's the platforms for the builders, which might be the OpenAI's API or the Zapier's makes the coding platforms that exist where people can build things faster. And then there are the AI tools that solve an explicit problem. So there's I use about 40, but there's one, for instance, called Fixer AI. And what Fixer AI does is automatically creates categorization labels on any of your emails that come in. So do I need to respond to this? Is this just a meeting update? Is it marketing? Is it an FYI? And then instead of like going through all of those emails, I can just go immediately through the two responds because it's classified them, and it'll create a draft in there. And I can, and 80% of the time, it's really darn good. And then I have to maybe do a little bit of tweaking to other ones. And then it'll actually get filed automatically into awaiting reply. So if somebody doesn't respond, it'll push it back up and automatically create a new email. And so those type of things, that really saves time. Our sales and research brief goes into our calendar. And whether it's like a new prospect, we do research on the company, the person, their likely pain points, and put it in a brief right in our calendar. And so we're saving 30 to 60 minutes of time for that. The same thing for sales, which also integrates into our CRM for the action items. The same thing for our internal team for anybody that missed the meeting to look at a recap of what happened without having to go to all these different tools. But when you look at the fixer AIs of the world, when you look at um, the fathoms for video recording and summary, right? I look at how can these tools save me time or energy? And if so, they're a worthwhile venture. If they're just something that can, do a summarize this email or reformat this email, like it doesn't really create that return on employee investment. It doesn't allow people to have more free time. They don't see the value of it. So what I generally tell people is go into this and say, what is a pain that is repetitive? I literally call it the ow, 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 ow framework. Because if you hate something, if it annoys the hell out of you every day, if it drives you mad, you shouldn't waste your energy on that. There are tools for almost everything now. And you can go to a Perplexity AI and you can say, hey, I hate writing emails. Are there any AI tools that help with that? I hate doing sales research. Are there any tools that help with that? And so instead of just saying, what works for me, people need to like actually assess a handful of different tools because they all operate differently, and it's a personal thing to identify like what actually drives you crazy, because it might not be the same thing that drives me crazy.
As we look ahead, how do you imagine this AI space evolving in the next 18 months? I'd like to say 3 years, but I mean, honestly, it'd be more realistic to say 3 months. But in the next 18 months, how do you see it evolving?
I'd say the biggest evolution will really be on that return on employee and large language model space. As I've mentioned already, machine learning, deep learning, the algorithms have been around for decades. We're not going to see monumental improvement or change there. Hopefully, with VP of AI roles and CAI roles, we'll have more people that can connect the dots in regards to business pain points, what data we have, and connecting those to create ROI. So we're going to start seeing some more maturation as we have more and more data AI type leaders. But the real change that we're going to see is in this large language model space. The way that I foresee this looking is that we look at ontologies, and there's going to be an overall company agent with all of your documentation, just the RAG agents that you've heard of today, that anybody can ask questions to. You're going to see internal agents that don't have hallucinations that can access your data. So if you're a CEO of a company and you have to go ask your CFO, who goes ask a data analyst for a report, you're waiting 2, 3, 5 days. Be able to just have a Google S search and say, "Hey, what do our projections look like this quarter, and are there any targets we're going to miss?" And it be able to hit our data, and it be able to provide those insights and a graph immediately for the CEO. They can rapidly accelerate decision making, and that's going to be huge. We'll also end up seeing companies with localized agents, like a sales agent, a marketing agent, a coding agent, and those can all interact with one another internal at organizations to rapidly expedite time to value. And then the one I'm most excited about are the digital twin and the AI virtual assistant. I think everyone in the world is going to want those two, because the AI virtual assistant could look at your calendar, your task, all of the things that you need to do, and you might have a task list that's 100, 200, 500 items long, and go, how do I make decisions on this? Like it's physically, mentally exhausting to like figure out what to do in a day. And most people, as you're probably aware, even executives are generally chasing fires. Recent reports said that 91% of executives spend 1 hour or less on strategy per month. That's so problematic. And
Mhm.
so having something that you can ask questions to in regards to your calendar, your task, like what needs to be done, how are things going, that's going to be really important, because that leads to the phase two aspect of time back of the digital twin. And being able to have a second brain that can get something you want to do 60, 80, 90% of the way there. Say, I want to build a new Gen AI primer workshop for executives. I want to build an AI training for account execs. But with all of my data, my writing style, how I think, my personal ontology, that really changes like the value creation for this, because now it's not just a generic ChatGPT type model, it's a reflection of you. And so you can now build strategy, you can build workshops, you can build programmatic content, you can build campaigns. And so that's the phase two side that I'm so excited about.
Finally, today, talk to me about the AI advisory group and how you help organizations today.
Yeah, there's really only three pillars. It's as simplistic as possible, because I look at it as what is really going to help people. It's not what are all the cool things we can sell, and there's a billion, right? The space is so noisy, so overwhelming, and I thought, what's really going to help our customers? And so when we think about the three pillars, we have executive level workshops. So you can think about that as you want to build a digital twin. We actually have people build a digital twin directly in the workshop. And so executives can start seeing the value and can start propagating that out to the team. But we also do ethics, risk governance around large language models. We do change management. We do AI strategy. We do people change, and we do sales training. So those workshops are for organizations that either have certain gaps and just want those fulfilled, or they want to really understand and start seeing the value of AI, because at the end of this, it's not an education training, it's helping them build something rapidly so that they can start implementing. The second is the advisory chief data analytics officers and AI officers, where the real value is exactly what we've talked about today. It's how do we align the leadership team? How do we create change management? How do we create trust in data? How do we create an AI strategy and vision? And so guiding that team to identify what's really going to move the needle, what's going to make us a truly data and AI driven company, we can coach and advise on that, because everyone on my team has been a Fortune 100 or 500 C-suite. They've experienced these pains more times than nearly anyone in the world. And then the last are those that don't have like a CDO or CAIO, and they don't know what they're doing. So we have fractional leaders who can guide the team, but they don't need to be there full time for a lot of these organizations, because there's so much low hanging fruit that why waste your time hiring someone at an executive level that you're disappointed with 12 to 18 months because they weren't able to get enough done in your eyes because they were trying to fix so many things, versus having someone come in for a few hours a week, a few hours a month, and say, here's the things you guys need to build. And then we'll come back and recap, and then we'll figure out what needs to be built next, get you accelerated on your AI journey.
Wonderful. This has been great, Matt. And again, for more information, the AIAG.com. Matt, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you to Matt. What a great conversation. If you'd like to catch previous episodes of Sweet Speak and didn't see it on LinkedIn Live, you can access those on jamesdwayne.com. That's DWAYNE, or wherever you get your podcasts. Sweet Speak is produced by James Dwayne Group. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Your support helps us reach more listeners like you. Thanks for listening.